Okay, thanks very much. Good morning again, council, staff, and the general public. Welcome to our 21 budget meeting process this morning. I'll call the meeting to order by resolution. Madam Clerk.
Moved by Councillor Laundrie, seconded by Councillor McDonald, that the budget meeting of the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry be hereby called to order.
Okay, thank you. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Mr. Simpson, did you want to speak in regards to the meeting process?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mr. Warden. Good morning, everybody. Just a couple points that I'd like to discuss before I turn it over to Rebecca to go through the introductory part. As you know, setting the annual budget is perhaps the most important process or policy-making piece that we undertake during the year. So a lot of work's gone into creating the draft document that you've had before you today, and you're going to be reviewing with us. Myself and the county directors and managers. Sorry, I muted myself. I apologize. Myself, the county directors and managers have been working on this draft, the numbers since about last August, September. So we're pleased to present the draft to you today. We chatted last, I believe in the fall, about when we would present the budget. We've done different processes in the past. We've followed this process where the draft's presented in the new year and then approved by council in the year of the budget. We've also done the process where we've completed the budget prior to year end. This process and timing's based on the direction we got from council last fall. We do have firmer numbers on, you know, the items like the surplus and assessment and things like that, things that they're going to help us create a more solid budget document. I want to thank all the directors for working hard in pulling the budget together, and especially to our Director of Financial Services, Rebecca Russell, for quarterbacking the whole process. It's a very complex exercise, as you can imagine. Just a couple housekeeping items. If you know, based on the direction from the warden, if there's changes, it would be helpful for us if there's changes or whatever we want to do on the fly. If motions would be you know, moved and seconded and passed, that way we've got very firm direction from council in terms of those changes you want. Rebecca will take all those motions and all that direction, and she'll use that to make changes to the draft that you have before you. We'll bring it back and you can review all the changes and the cumulative effects. So that, I think, will just make the process go a little quicker or better. Rebecca's going to give the introduction, and then we're just going to go through the budget document in sequence. So, for instance, I'm going to speak to council and committees, corporate services, and economic development and tourism. I've got Karina Belanger, whom you know, she's going to cover the economic development and tourism piece when we get to it, probably this afternoon. Ben's going to cover the office complex budget. You'll recall that with the retirement of Helen Thompson, responsibility for the administrative complex moved out of corporate services and into transportation and planning services. So he's going to be covering that. I'll cover the police services budget. Karen Franklin will cover the library services budget. Rebecca will do health and social services, which are services that are delivered on our behalf by the city. Rebecca is also going to cover financial services and the court division of financial services. IT services is going to be covered by Mike. And finally, Ben will cover planning, forestry, and transportation. So, and I believe we have to be finished. If we're not finished by 3 o'clock, there'll be a motion to recess the meeting because I know several members have other commitments that they have to take care of. So if we're not done by 3 o'clock or so today, we'll recess and we'll adjourn tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So with that, Mr. Warden, unless there's any questions, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Russell to start us off, kick us off.
Okay, thanks very much, Tim. Just a quick reminder, Rebecca, we're going to quit for lunch right at 12 o'clock, so I'm not sure how you want to shuffle if there's any smaller ones that you want to get out of the way in the next 40 minutes or so, and then we can go from there. So go ahead.
I think our current setup will manage that timeline. So we won't have to start. Yeah. Okay. All right, so with that, I'll begin. I'll start by sharing my screen. If you give me a moment.
Okay, while she's doing that, if any members of council have questions or comments, maybe you can just put your hand or put in the chat you have a question? Because I'm not going to see everybody once we have this screen up. So if you do that, I'll acknowledge you right away.
Okay, can everybody see my presentation screen?
No.
No? Okay, sorry. All right, how about now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So I'll begin. Okay. Well, good morning, Council. I would like to start by reviewing some of the key points of the budget that are included in the budget document that we provided. The 2021 budget was challenging. However, we're pleased to announce that we've met the target directed by Council. The decrease in tax rate is 0.85% based on the draft document. Any changes throughout this meeting will impact this number. The average residential property value has increased from $220,459 to $221,633, which was solely due to growth in 2020. This represents an increase of 0.53%. Despite this small increase in the average CVA, the draft budget will see a decrease of $4.11 in county property taxes. OMPF funding supports operational costs. This amount continues to decline by 15% per year. COVID funding is included in the budget to offset operational expenses and minor capital, as well as revenue losses due to the pandemic. The net effect of the funding and expenses is zero. Last year, Councillor Williams asked a question regarding MPAC that I thought was good to mention now in the budget discussions. MPAC is responsible for assessing every property in Ontario. They provide property valuation and services to taxpayers and municipalities. They're made up of a board of directors consisting of 7 municipal representatives, 4 property taxpayer representatives, and 5 provincial government representatives. In 2021, there will be no phase-in. There is a 4-year phase-in, and the last phase-in period was from 2016 to 2020. The 2021 year will be based on 2020 values. So if we look at assessments by class, the residential class makes up the largest amount of assessment in SDG at 58%, followed by farm and managed forests, which makes up 32%. The other class includes payment in lieu's, landfills, and pipelines. In total, assessments equal just over $11 billion. Weighted assessment would be $8.7 billion. When we look at how taxation revenue is distributed, the largest contributor is from the residential property class, followed by commercial, then farm and managed forest. Tax ratios distribute the tax burden between classes relative to the residential tax ratio, which is equal to 1. In 1998, the Fair Municipal Finance Act provided municipalities with limited authority to establish tax ratios for each property class. For example, a property with a ratio of 2 would pay twice the amount of a municipal tax as similarly valued residential property. The chart also demonstrates the percentages of weighted assessment by class. So the residential, for an example, makes up 74% of the weighted assessment. So property taxes fund many divisions of services. Looking at this graph, based on every 100,000 of residential assessment, it generates $578 in property tax revenue. The chart illustrates where the $578 is spent relative to that service area. The transportation network is the largest contributor of expenses due to the nature of assets and roads and bridges and culverts, as well as the operational costs and capital work that's required annually. Police services are delivered by the provincial government through the Ontario Provincial Police, which is the second highest cost at 16%. Health and social services are delivered by various agencies, Eastern Ontario Health Unit, outreach programs, and shared services, which include EMS, social services, and Glen Stordon Lodge, as well as social housing. Okay, I thought it was important to inform Council of a property tax reform that was included in the provincial budget. The optional small business property subclass. This new subclass would provide relief to qualifying small businesses that would reduce the tax burden to this subclass. There is no regulation from the province yet, but it will be coming. There are many things to consider with this new subclass. The definition of small business must be defined by the municipality. Unlike small on-farm business, MPAC nor the province will define this. There will be no guidelines to follow, and these must be established by individual municipalities. It will be the responsibility of the municipalities to collect and evaluate assessment data, identify properties affected, and inform MPAC. They will also need to assess the criteria of the requests that come in. In order to do that, there should be policies and guidelines established to consider all these factors. Should the subclass be accepted, it will affect the tax ratio, resulting in the tax burden being transferred to all other property classes, mostly residential. This would increase the residential tax rate. An important item to note is that the province has communicated that they will consider matching reductions. However, there's no indication of how this will be done yet. A few other considerations that are key. It cannot be established this early in the year which properties would be eligible. Therefore, the impact to other property classes is unknown. Council may decide to make the subclass short-term or long-term, and it can be eliminated in future years. How will the small business be defined? What criteria is required? It may take a complete, well, it will take a complete full analysis of the program, and it requires refinement. Perhaps this should be a joint endeavor if it is something that council wants to do with the local municipalities, if adopted, because it would avoid 6 different sets of guidelines and would be consistent across all of SDG. Will it be limited to owner-occupied business or a business in a lease space? The reason I wanted to include this point is that the property owner would pay less taxes. How would it get transferred to the small business that may be leasing space? There's a lot of information that's still to come, but I wanted to inform council of this subclass. And if I receive any more information in the near future, I'll definitely share it with council. Do I have any questions on the small business property subclass? I'll move on.
I don't see any questions in the chat at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So vacancy rebates. This is something I've been wanting to see happen for a long time. I spent much of the my last 2 years working on this. The Municipal Act has defaulted reductions for vacant and commercial industrial properties, 30% allocated to commercial and 35% to industrial. Flexibility with the program came in 2017, which provided municipalities the option of discontinuing the subclass or establishing new criteria. This could only be done by a formal request to the province, and public notice of the change was required. At the time, the local municipalities, we all agreed that the administration of the program was minimal, and so were the costs. So we've maintained the program as is. Just recently in the provincial budget, it was announced that local municipalities can now make the changes to the vacancy rebate program at the local level through a bylaw, which can alter or eliminate the vacant and excess land subclass without provincial approval. So this has become a much more flexible and efficient way of addressing the vacancy rebate program going forward. So with regards to the introduction, are there any questions? Next would be council and committees. So I'll stop sharing my screen. There we go. All right.
I thought I heard a question before we go.
Okay. We do have a question from Councillor Williams.
Thank you. With regards to the rebate, Rebecca, what is the sentiment of the local treasurers on that?
So now that we have the option at the local level, local levels can tweak, so to speak, their own criteria of the vacancy rebate program or abolish it completely. Some municipalities like to have the availability of the program for vacancy rebates, whereas others may feel there could be some abuse year after year of having the same applicants and not, maybe there isn't as much advantage or leverage with trying to get the space leased. So the local municipalities all have preferences on their own, and we were all following one guideline. Now each municipality can make changes on their own. And I thought it was important to mention that to council. We have communicated that with the local municipalities. Some will likely be tweaking and some will leave it as is, but it also allows for local municipalities who don't want to support the program anymore, as most are abolishing the program with the East region, as well as I think the city of Cornwall did a few years ago. So it does give more flexibility without having to go to the province to ask for permission and without the public surveys, public engagement, and those types of things. Now it's much easier to make those refined criteria of the program.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Yeah, I just think it's the program is a disincentive to actually upgrading some buildings, especially on main streets where they're visible. And then they just sit vacant because, 30%, what they pay 30% less tax or 35% less tax, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll bring that up to our local council.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions at this time, Rebecca.
Okay, so I suppose the next would be CAO Simpson for the council and committees.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. And just before I share my screen, I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on stuff that we did last year's budget. That's all. There's the narrative you have in your document. It talks about the main accomplishments last year, the budget variances and the reason, and then some of the impacts. So I'm going to spend my time talking about this year and the reason and the rationale around what we're budgeting for we are. So I'm just going to go ahead and share screen. Okay. So this is the council and committee document that you have in your budget at page 17. So I'll just go through some of the line items, the main portion, and Mr. Warden or any member of council just chime in if you have any questions. You'll note that on things like the wages and benefits this year, it's down from last year, and that's based on we're having there's fewer meetings based on what we did in last year, and as well the mileage is down, and that's obviously reduced based on COVID. And we're not driving to meetings; we're going to virtual meetings. We don't know how long that's going to last. Probably, depending on when people are vaccinated, at least into the summer, perhaps into the fall this year. So that's the reason for that moving down slightly. Meetings and conferences line item, that's based on 2020, and again has been reduced based on the impact of the pandemic and getting together in person. You'll notice under the corporate memberships line item, it's 17,500. That's the amount that's going to the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus. There's a $7,500 base fee, and the Wardens Caucus voted, I believe last year, to increase the fee by $10,000 for each member, which we are. And what they're doing is they're taking that $10,000 from all the 13 members and they're putting that into a reserve, and that's to do special projects and things like that. So they're going to have a little bit of maneuverability in terms of how they move forward with some of those special projects that they undertake from time to time. Under the supplies and equipment, that is the cost for the eScribe system that somebody brought up earlier. And Kimberly Castleman, our Director of Corporate Services clerk, she's working to set that up for us going forward in this year. You'll notice under EOWC expenses, that's down. We weren't able to host the meeting last year. We had planned on hosting a meeting. So the cost was about $5,000. So we weren't able to host the meeting, so we're not budgeting anything in this year. We're going to host a meeting in July, but it'll be virtual. The archiving project, I believe was it late last year when our MPP Duncan came to talk about that again. We're using the $22,000 that was unspent in 2020 to finish to continue scanning the stuff that's remaining outstanding and finish that project this year. So that's included in the budget for this year. The grants and donations, that will be discussed shortly in the next section. There's a table that we're going to go through with annual contributions or donations, and then any other discretionary stuff that council would like to add. So we'll go through that in detail next section. Those next two line items, committee wages and benefits, mileage and supplies, that relates to the accessibility committee that the counties has to have, and they're responsible for implementing things like the AODA and making sure that our buildings, our websites are accessible. So they weren't able to meet in 2020 because of the pandemic. So that number is down, and you'll see that number is minimal this year as well. And again, that's because of the pandemic. I'll touch upon the county support services. You'll see that line item throughout the budgets. That's a standard. It's not a standard. It's a standard line item, but it's not a standard amount, and that's the amount that each department is charged. It's an internal charge to cover all the common costs of operating the building. So, you know, all the building maintenance, all the heating, cooling, stuff like that. Office space and flooring and so on and so forth is allocated there. So that's the amount that's been allocated to council under council support county support services for that. So is there any questions on that from any members of council, Mr. Warden, before we move forward?
I don't see
Pretty
any.
straightforward.
Yeah, I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay. Okay. So we'll move on to page 20 of your agenda. That's the chart I mentioned. That is the donations line item, and I'll just go through it. The St. Lawrence River Institute, that's something that council's been making a $10,000 donation to each year. So that's included. Anything you see in this chart's included, and we'll talk about some of the stuff, or if council wants to add anything else, we'll talk about it in a minute. County fairs, there's $9,000, so each fair is given $1,000 per year. Beyond 21, that was a specific request that was made in calendar year 2020 to support the opening of their facility in 2020. So that $50,000 donation was made. We talked about the finalizing the reserve amounts that we have for the Dundas Manor and the Maxville Manor. So those amounts would go into those line items and those donations, and would fulfill our obligations to have those funds available for when both of those manors come ahead and start construction. So that's included as a donation. The RN position we talked about earlier with Inspector Hardy and Constable Blanchette. That 80, you'll see it's $120,000 in the budget. So what Rebecca and I and the two officers from the OPP had some discussions over the last week or two. You recall that the program started in September. So it was planned to go September to September, but what we thought, just to make it cleaner, and you know, from an accounting and administration point of view, not only for them but for us, we include the full $120,000 in our budget, so it's in there this year to support that RN position with the OPP for the full year, calendar year of 2021. And as Inspector Hardy said, he'll be, depending on, you know, their funding applications and things like that, he'll be coming back to County Council sometime later in the year. I suspect to request funding moving into to 2022. So that amount in donations covers that position for the full calendar year of 2021. The Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network, there is a motion on that. That was based on a presentation that Mr. Manley made, I believe in December, perhaps January, to our council, asking for support for that Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network. I do note that the city has provided one-year funding for $25,000, as well as the $40,000 from Prescott Russell. So I think it's a good thing to support for at least you know, going forward into 2021. They've asked for a multi-year commitment, but part of the motion that council is going to be considering is that we fund it for calendar year 2021, and that prior to the end of the year, they come forward with their plan, you know, how they've spent the money this year, what their business plan, what their work plan is going forward, and then at this time, later this year, council can decide whether they want to continue to fund that network. And then there's miscellaneous donations of $1,000. That's a small amount of money that council has that's at its discretion if you get any in-year requests for donations. So those are the ones that are included in there.
Sorry, Mr. Simpson, I have a question or a comment from
yeah, go ahead.
Councillor Byfels in regards to the Agri-Food Network. So Councillor Byfels, if you would.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I could have reserved my comments till the draft motion was on the table, but I do believe we could support this project. I know it certainly could help, especially the small producers of Eastern Ontario, but also the large ones. I think I want to ensure, and I do like your attitude that we'll give them to a year and they come back and demonstrate to us what they have done. However, as I mentioned to Mr. Manley when he presented that, his philosophy needs to be a little bit more open, and there are conventional producers out there that should be part of that. I know that he has reached out to the Denses here in South Dundas, as what we've seen in our last newsletter. So if he continues on that commitment and broadens his scope and ensures that any kind of agricultural producer, whether they're organic, ecological, or conventional, is part of it, then I think that's something that we as the council can support.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Bijvelds. So there are a few requests that are the print materials included in your agenda. There's two of them that have asked for funding. There's the Chestervolan District Historical Society. They're requesting $1,000 to reprint their history book. The letters in there, as well as the Royal Canadian Legion has asked for $940 for their, I'll just scroll through there, for their military service recognition book. So on those two, I'll turn it over to council to provide direction in terms of what you'd like to do with those.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question or comment from Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just to go over the Chesterfield District Historical Society request for $1,000. That's it's not merely a reprint. It's the latest version, and I'm wrong. I should know this better, but I think the present copy has to be more than 20 years old. Or the last version was more than 20 years old. So this is an update. This is the latest version of the Chesterfield District Historical Society book on history of Chesterville, outlining accomplishments, successes, and struggles. And it's not a request that's made every year, obviously, if the last time the edition came out was more than 20 years ago.
Okay.
I think this is something that's important to capture and to support those that are keeping track of our history locally and throughout SDG. Thank you, Mr. Ward.
Okay, thank you. I do agree with Councillor Fraser in regards to the funding request for the $1,000. It's not a big amount to continue keeping our history in throughout the 3 United Counties, so it's something I will be supporting. I believe there's a comment from Councillor Williams. Go ahead, and then Councillor Gardner right after.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I just want to speak to the agri-food network. I as well think that this is valuable to participate in, and given that we'll have a seat on the board, we'll be able to keep a close eye on the kind of progress that's made. I do continue to have a concern that they are very broad in their approach and trying to work on many different aspects of agri-food. So, it's important to not try to be everything to everyone, but to actually make some solid inroads in this industry, which I think is entirely possible. So I think it's a great idea. With regards to the Chesterfield District Historical Society, that looks like a great venture. I'm just wondering if that's if they've approached their local council for support on this, as it is a local venture.
I'll turn that to Councillor Fraser, but I believe we have.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden, and to Councillor Williams. Yes, and they've reached locally, and my understanding is they've contacted members of our neighboring councils as well for their support. I'm not sure if that support was demonstrated through a motion through council or a support from members themselves. But yes, they've reached out to more than just SDG.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Gardner, please.
Thanks, Warden Prevost. I'd like to support both the Chesterville and District Historical Society and the Legion. They're small amounts. They've come in, they've done due diligence to make sure that we're having this discussion at budget time. And I think it just speaks to any organization that was able to rally during a pandemic to actually try and get a project off the ground. Because it's such a low amount, I think it's more of a moral support in moving forward with some of these groups. They haven't had the regular. Normally, I'd agree with Councillor Williams in the fact that they do seem, well, not the Legion, but the Chesterville one seems quite localized. However, this hasn't been a regular year, and I think there's been a lot of opportunities that have dried up, and normally they probably go to businesses, and as we all know, the businesses have not, some businesses have not had great success this year. So I'm okay with the 1940.
Okay, thank you. Tim, are you looking for either a motion or something from council members in regards to approving the budget, the donation budget the way it stands? Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, I think there's a couple motions. If I might, the clerk has a motion prepared for the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network that Councillor Williams spoke to. So maybe we'll do that, and then a motion approving this with what I'm hearing is the addition of the Chesterville and District Historical Society. And I apologize, it's Councillor Fraser was right. It wasn't a reprinting. It's a printing, and adding the Royal Canadian Legion as well, per Councillor Gardner.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree. It's a small amount they're asking for. And if I understand, it's a one-time deal. So I don't think they'll be back in the future to look for additional dollars. But okay, so Kimberly, do you have a motion in regards to the Agri-Food Network one?
Yes, I do, Mr. Warden. The proposed motion reads that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry provide financial assistance to the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network of $25,000 per year for up to 3 years, funding in years 2 and 3 contingent upon Council's approval of the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network's annual report, said report including financial and deliverables information, and that Councillor Karma Williams be appointed to the Eastern Ontario Agri-Food Network Board of Directors for the duration of this term of council.
Okay, thank you. The only issue I have is I can't see all members of council.
Could you call them by name, Mr. Warden?
Mr. Warden.
Yep.
Stephen, Councillor Bible is here. I'll say the motion, or
You'll move that?
I'll move it. Sorry, lost my train of thought. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can I have somebody second the motion? Then I'll ask for a vote and I'll go through the members of council.
I can second it.
Okay, we're seconded by Councillor Gardner. So I'll go around the table. If you could just say yay or nay. If I forget somebody, I do apologize. Councillor McDonald.
Yay.
Councillor Wirt.
Yes.
Oh, there, I got everybody now. So I'll just ask for a show of hands. All in favor of the motion. The motion is carried. Thank you. Much quicker and easier.
Mr. Warden, I do have another motion for the other donations. It reads that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve the additional council donation request from the Chesterville and District Historical Society in the amount of $1,000 and the Royal Canadian Legion in the amount of $940.
Okay, can I have somebody move and second that, please? Moved by Councillor Fraser, second by Councillor Armstrong. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. Carry on, please.
Okay.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Warden, Rebecca just messaged me. What is in the budget right now is $80,000 for the RN program. So I have drafted a motion to top that up to $120,000 for 2021, if council would like to put that forward.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
So the proposed motion reads that the Council of the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry approve that the SDG OPP Mobile Crisis Response Team RN program budget be increased to $120,000 for 2021.
Okay, it was moved by Councillor Gardner, second by Councillor McDonald. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, are we back to you, Tim?
Yes, Mr. Warden. So is there anything further on donations that any member of council has before we move on to corporate services? Okay, thank you.
Councillor, sorry, Councillor Work. You're on mute, Councillor Work.
I wasn't sure, through you, Mr. Warden, sorry. I wasn't sure if this was the time to ask this question, and I certainly want to congratulate staff for the reserve for setting on. I think these levels are probably unprecedented. But just to clarify, we've got 3 million right now for Dundas and Maxville showing on the 2020 budget. Is the balance of that, which meets our expectation, in the reserves, or have we already allocated a portion of that payment and the reserves actually reflect that being paid to Dundas and Maxville? Is that clear?
Yeah, if I might, Mr. Warden, I mean, Rebecca can jump in, but I believe adding the dollars this year into that reserve puts the full amounts that we've committed, the 4 million and the 2.5 million in those reserves, and they're ready for the two facilities to come forward and request those funds. So
thank you.
Those are our financial commitment.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm going to start sharing again. Okay, so we're going to move on to page 25, which is corporate services. Okay, so we talked during a regular council meeting, we talked about the broadband. You'll note that there's $25,000, almost $26,000 revenue for broadband in there, and that's the I'm not sure how many years we're in. Time flies, 6 or 7 years in, I would think, of that repayment from the city of that $260,000. So that's where that revenue come from. We have a few more years of that. You'll note that under the transfer reserves, there's $70,000 in there. Those are from the efficiency reserves. So that's the unspent money that we had from the Emily 911, which is available again this year to local municipalities to support efforts of their local landowners to put up Emily 911 signs. So that's included in that transfer from reserves. And then records management, that's the whole piece around e-scribe and those other actions that we need to take to get our records management piece up to snuff. So hopefully we'll be able to do that this year. So that's where those are the funds that are included in those transfers. You'll note that under wages and benefits, there's an increase there. The main driver of that includes, you recall last year we hired Todd Lai, who is our communications individual. So we've got the full year of that expense into the budget, which includes which includes benefits this year, as well as the salary. So that's kind of an all-in budget figure. So that's a full year of having that position on board. The solicitor fees, you'll note that we traditionally budget $9,000 under that. We overspent that line item. Last year we had some legal issues which council's aware of. So that's the reason for the number last year. We've gone back to the usual $9,000 for this year. Under the 911, you'll note that it's about $28,000, and the county provides 911 answering service through a contractor on not only behalf of the county but on behalf of the city. So that's a cost that we incur for that. And then under projects, you'll see there's $100,000 in the projects line item. That includes the $60,000 for the educational consultant project or study that council has approved, plus the records management system, the software, and so on and so forth under there. So in a nutshell, that's corporate services. And Mr. Warden, if there's any questions on any of those light items, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any comments or questions in the chat box, but if there's anybody that has a question, if you can just speak up now. Okay, not seeing none or hearing none, we can carry on. Mr. Simpson, please.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to page 29 in your package. And that would be the economic development and tourism revenue. Karina, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Okay, so Karina, maybe are you going to, do you want me to continue to share my screen or do you want to share your screen?
No, I'm okay if you want to share your screen and I can speak to it.
Okay, great. Good morning.
All right, so good morning, Council. I'm happy to be here to present the economic development and tourism budgets. So I'm going to review some of the high-level projects that we have planned for 2021, and please let me know if there's any questions. So to begin with the economic development budget, we're including several of the key priorities that were developed in the strategic planning workshop that was held in October. So the advertising and marketing budget includes dollars to support the ongoing advocacy efforts, as well as the development of the county-wide toolkit and corporate marketing campaign that we spoke about. We're again requesting $250,000 for the regional incentives program. So despite the challenges that we faced with COVID-19 last year, the program was still very well received. We approved over 30 projects with an estimated ROI of 8-to-1 last year. One of the larger projects that we're looking to launch this year, it was presented at the December council meeting, is the Date Our County initiative. So we're really excited about this, and we feel with the impacts from COVID and the increase of remote work that now is definitely the time to introduce this program. So if you recall in the December presentation, there was an estimated cost of $60,000 for this program. So this included accommodations, advertising, and some miscellaneous expenses. So we are requesting a change to the original amounts that we have budgeted for the advertising in order to fund this program. So currently we have approximately $25,000 in that line item for Date Our County. We're requesting to reallocate some funds from the wages and benefits, so approximately $17,000 due to the manager of economic development position being vacant in January and February. We're also looking to reallocate approximately $8,000 from the meeting and conferences. Just due to COVID, we feel there'll be less travel and less meetings. So overall, this would bring us to approximately $49,000 for the program. So we're requesting an additional $11,000 to be able to effectively launch this initiative. I'm not sure if there's any questions now or if you would like me to go through the tourism portion first.
I don't see any, so head to the tourism one and then.
Sure. Okay, so for tourism, again, the highlights are the production and distribution of the 2021 guide. So this is, again, a very important piece for tourism, and we want to build on the successful 2020 version. Again, we're predicting a lot of shop local and staycations. So we have plans similar to last year to distribute locally. As far as the website, we're still looking to continue development of where Ontario began to include an industry section. We're still working on the SDG Cornwall Adventure Club cycling map. We're expanding it to include a loyalty program this year with some collectible badges. After much discussion around the SDG jail, we have decided to not open the jail this season. So just due to the uncertainties with COVID and the new procedures, we felt it would be better to have the jail remain closed and instead focus on a feasibility study of the property. We also want to have some 3D tours complete, which will add to our digital assets as well as help with accessibility tours once the facility does open again. We do intend, again, to hire 3 summer students instead of 2 for the Cycling Tourism Ambassador Program and build off of our success of last year. Moving to the tourism grants, last year we awarded $25,000. We paid out $6,500 and carried over $18,500. So this year we're asking for another $6,500 to bring us up to the $25,000. The recipients from last year do have the first right of refusal on the 18.5. And finally, we're continuing our work with the regional tourism signage program, again asking for $50,000. This is the second year of a 5-year revamp, and the goal is to remain revenue neutral, which we were able to do last year. So just to review some budget options, there are, again, the regional incentives is $250,000. The date, our county, we were requesting an increase of $11,000. The regional tourism grant, right now we're asking for $6,500 in new funding. And the historic jail, right now we're proposing to keep the facility closed. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Tim, if you can take the screen down, thank you. We'll open up to any questions or comments in regards to tourism or economic development. Not seeing none. So Rebecca or Kimberly, do we have a motion for that one also, or do we have them all? Are they all separate? Just one.
No, through you, Mr. Warden, there's no motions for that section.
So we'll just have one at the end, I guess, if that's the case. Okay, not seeing none. Thank you, Karina, for your reports. I think we'll break at this point. It's coming on to the 12 o'clock. Is 30 minutes enough for lunch break? Okay, thank you. So we'll reconvene at 12:30 p.m.